どうも、勝手に電力2.0で感じたいと思います。今日1139回目というところで、このワールドエナジーアウトロック2023というところの続きでですね、少し今回、サマリーというところで結構今回の話題が EV、ソーラー、チャイナみたいなところがですね、めちゃくちゃメイントピックで出てきて、やっぱり実際にこの EV とかソーラーっていうところ、まさに中国っていうところ、チャイナっていうところが影響大きいの。このあたりもやっぱり知っておくっていう意味で、このアウトロックを見ていってもいいのかなと思ってますと。The energy world remains fragile but has effective ways to improve energy security and tackle emissions. Some of the immediate pressure from the global energy crisis have eased, but energy markets, geopolitics, and the global economy and the unsettled and the risk of further disruption is ever present. Fossil fuel prices are down from their 2022 peaks, but markets are tense and volatile. Continued fighting in Ukraine more than a year after Russia's invasion is now accompanied by the risk of protracted conflict in the Middle East. The microeconomic mood is downbeat, with stubborn inflation, higher borrowing costs, and elevated debt levels. Today, the global average surface temperature is already around 1.2 Celsius above pre-industrial levels, prompting heat waves and other extreme weather events. And greenhouse gas emissions have not yet peaked. The energy sector is also the primary cause of the polluted air that more than 90% of the world population is forced to breathe, linked to more than 6 million premature deaths a year. Positive trends on improving access to electricity and clean cooking have slowed or even reversed in some countries. Against this complex backdrop, the emergence of a new clean energy economy led by solar PV and electric vehicle EVs provide hopes for the way forward. Investment in clean energy has risen by 40% since 2020. The push to bring down emissions is a key reason, but not the only one. The economic case for major clean energy technology is strong. Energy security is also an important factor, particularly in fewer importing countries, as industrial strategies and the desire to create clean energy jobs. Not all clean technologies are thriving, and some supply chains, notably for wind, are under pressure, but there are striking examples of an accelerating pace of change. In 2020, one in 25 cars sold was electric in 2023. This is now one in five. More than 500 gigawatts of renewable generation capacity are set to be added in 2023, a new record. More than $1 billion a day is being spent on solar deployment. Manufacturing capacity for key components of a clean energy system, including solar PV modules and EV batteries, is expanding fast. This momentum is why the IEA recently concluded in its updated net zero roadmap that the pathway to limiting global warming to 1.5 cm is very difficult but remains open. This new outlook provides a strong evidence base to guide the choices that face energy decision makers in pursuit of transitions that are rapid, secure, affordable, and inclusive. The analysis does not present a single view of the future, but instead explore different scenarios that reflect current real-world conditions and starting points. The stated policy scenario steps provide an outlook based on the latest policy setting, including energy, climate, and related industrial policies. The announced pledged scenario APS assumed all nation energy and climate targets made by governments are met in full and on time. Yet much additional progress is still required to meet the objectives of the net zero emissions by 2050 NZE scenario, which limits global warming to 1.5 cm. Alongside our main scenarios, we explore some key uncertainties that could affect future trends, including structural change in China's economy and the pace of global deployment of solar PV. Electric car sales is stated policy scenario 2015 to 2030ということで、2030にはですね、もう EV がめちゃくちゃ増えていくっていうところが見えると。ソーラー PV capacity addition is stated policy scenario 2015 to 2030ってことで PV もめちゃくちゃ増えていくと。Economic growth in China っていうところで、Economic growth in China っていうところは少し減速しているっていう状況です。We are on track to see all fossil fuel peak before 2030. Our legacy of the global energy crisis may be to usher in the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era. The momentum behind clean energy transition is now sufficient for global demand for coal, oil, and natural gas to all reach a high point before 2030 in the steps. The share of coal, oil, and natural gas in global energy supply, stuck for decades around 80%, starts to edge downwards and reaches 73% in the steps by 2030. This is an important shift. However, if demand for these fossil fuels remains at a high level, as has been the case for coal in recent years, and as is the case in the steps projections for oil and gas, it is far from enough to reach global climate goals. Policies supporting clean energy are deliberating as the projected pace picks up in key markets around the world. Thanks large act in the United States will be electric in 2030 the steps. 2 years ago, the corresponding figure in the WO 2020, well, 2021 was 12%. In European Union in 2030, heat pump installation in the steps reached two-thirds of the level needed in the NZE scenario, compared with the one-third projected 2 years ago. In China, projected additions of solar PV and offshore wind to 2030 are now 3 times higher than they are in the well 2021. Prospects for nuclear power have also improved in leading markets, with support for lifetime extensions of existing nuclear reactors in countries including Japan, Korea, and the United States, as well as for new built in several more. Also, demand for fossil fuels has been strong in recent years. There are signs of change in the direction. Alongside the deployment of low-emission alternatives, the rate at which new assets that use fossil fuel are being added to the energy system has slowed. Sales of cars and 2-3-wheel vehicle with internal combustion engines are well below where they were before the COVID-19 pandemic. In the electricity sector, worldwide additions of coal and natural gas-fired power plants have halved at least from earlier peaks. Sales of resident gas boilers have been trending downwards and are now outnumbered by sales of heat pumps in many countries in Europe and in the United States. China had changed the energy world, but now China is changing. China has an outsized role in shaping global energy trends. This influence is evolving as its economy grows and its structure adjusts, and as clean energy use grows. Over the past 10 years, China accounted for around almost two-thirds of the rise in global oil use, nearly one-third of the increase in natural gas, and has been the dominant player in coal markets. But it is widely recognized, including by the country's leadership, that China's economy is reaching an inflection point. After a very rapid building out of the country's physical infrastructure, the scope for further additions is narrowing. The country already has a world-class high-speed rail network, and residential floor space per capita is now equal to that of Japan. Even though GDP per capita is much lower, this saturation points to lower future demand in many energy-intensive sectors like cement and steel. China is also clean energy powerhouse, accounting for around half of wind and solar additions and well over half of global EV sales in 2022. Momentum behind China's economic growth is adding, and there is greater downside potential for fossil fuel demand if it slows further. In our scenario, China's GDP growth average just under 44% per year to 2030. This results in its total energy demand peaking around the middle of this decade. with robust expansion of clean energy putting overall fossil fuel demand and emissions into decline. If China's near-term growth were to slow by another percent point, this would reduce 2030 coal demand by an amount almost equal to the volume currently consumed by the whole Europe. Oil import volumes would be declined by 5% and energy imports by more than 20%, with major implications for global balance. New dynamics for investment are taking shape. The end of the growth era for fossil fuel does not mean an end to fossil fuel investment, but it undercuts the rationale for any increase in spending. Until this year, meeting projected demand in the steps implied an increase in oil and gas investment over the course of this decade. But a stronger clean energy outlook and lower projected fossil fuel demand means this is no longer the case. However, investment in oil and gas today is almost double the level required in energy scenario in 2030, signaling clear risk of protracted fossil fuel use that would put 1.5 system goal out of reach. Simply, cutting spending on oil and gas will not get the world on track for the energy scenario. The key to an orderly transition is to scale up investment in all aspects of clean energy system. The development of the clean energy system and its effect on emission can be reinforced by politics that is the exit of insufficient polluting assets, such as aging coal plants, or that restrict the entry of new ones into system. But the urgent challenge is to increase the pace of new clean energy projects, especially in many emerging and developing economies outside China, where investment in China transition needs to rise by more than 5 times by 2032, which the level required in energy scenario. A renewed effort, including stronger international support, will be vital to tackle obstacles such as high cost of capital limited fiscal base for government support and challenging business environments. Meeting development needs in the sustainable way is key to moving faster. The global peaks in demand for each of the three fossil fuel most important differences across economies at different stages of development. The drivers for growth in demand for energy services in most emerging and developing economies remain very strong. Rates of urbanization, built space per capita, and ownership of air conditioners and vehicles are far lower than in advanced economies. The global population is expected to grow about 1.7 billion by 2050, almost all of which is added to urban areas in Asia and Africa. India is the world's largest source of energy demand growth in the steps ahead of Southeast Asia and Africa. Finding and financing low emission ways to meet rising energy demand in these economies is a vital determinant of the speed at which global fossil fuel use eventually falls. Clean electrification, improvements in efficiency, and a switch to lower and zero carbon fuels are key levers available to emerging and developing economies to reach their national energy and climate targets. Getting on track to meet these targets, including net zero goals, has broad implications for future pathway. In India, it means every dollar of value added by India's industry results in 20% less carbon dioxide by 2030 than it does today. And each kilometer driven by a passenger car on average emits 25% less CO2. Some 60% of two and three wheelers sold in 2030 are electric, a share 10 times higher than today. In Indonesia, the share of renewable in power generation doubled by 2030 to more than 35%. In Brazil, biofuels meet 40% of road transport fuel demand by the end of the decade, up from 25% today. In sub-Saharan Africa, meeting the diverse national energy and climate targets mean that 85% of new power generation plants to 2030 are based on renewables. Significant progress is made towards universal access to modern energy, with some 670 million people gaining access to modern cooking fuels, and 500 million to electricity by 2030. Ample global manufacturing capacity offers considerable upside for solar PV. Renewables are set to contribute 80% of new power capacity to 2030 in the steps, with solar PV alone accounting for more than half. However, this use is only a fraction of the world's potential. Solar has become a major global industry and is set to transform electricity markets even in the steps. But there is significant scope for further growth given manufacturing plans and the technology's competitiveness. By the end of the decade, the world could have manufacturing capacity for more than 1,200 gigawatts of panels per year. But in the steps, only 500 gigawatts is deployed globally in 2030. Boosting deployment up from these levels raises some complex questions. It would require measures, notably expanding and strengthening the grid and adding storage. To integrate the additional solar PV into electricity system and maximize its impact, manufacturing capacity is also high concentrated. China is already the largest producer, and its expansion plans far outstrip those in the other countries. Trade, therefore, would continue to be vital to support worldwide deployment of solar. Using 70% of anticipated solar PV manufacturing capacity would bring deployment to the level projected in the energy scenario effectively integrated. This would further cut fossil fuel use. First and foremost coal. In the sensitivity case, we explore how the steps projections would change if the world added over 800 gigawatts of new solar PV per year by 2030. The implementation would be partially strong for China, reducing coal-fired generation by further 20% by 2030. Compared with the steps without assuming any additional retirements, the average annual capacity factor for coal-fired power plants would fall to around 30% in 2030. From over 50% today, the consequence will spread well beyond China. In this case, more than 70 gigawatts of additional solar PV is deployed on average each year to 2030 across Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. Even with modest curtailment, this reduces fossil fuel fire generation in these regions by about one quarter in 2030 compared with the steps. Solar PV alone cannot get the world on track to meet its climate goals, but more than any other clean technology, it can light up the way. A wave of new LNG export projects is set to remodel gas markets. Starting in 2025, an unprecedented surge in new LNG projects is set to tip the balance of market and concerned about natural gas supply. In recent years, gas markets have been dominated by fear and about security and price spikes after Russia cut supplies to Europe. Market balances remain precarious in the immediate future, but that changed from the middle of the decade. Projects that have started construction or taken final investment decision are set to add 250 billion cubic meters per year of liquefaction capacity by 2030, equal to almost half of today's global energy supply. Announced timeline suggested a particular large increase between 2025 and 2027, more than half of the new projects are in the United States and Qatar. This additional energy arrives at an uncertain moment for natural gas demand and creates major difficulties for Russia's diversification strategy toward Asia. The strong increase in energy production capacity eases prices and gas supply concerns, but comes to market at a time when global gas demand growth has slowed considerably since its golden age of the 2010s. Alongside gas contracted on the longer term basis to end users, we estimate that more than one third of the new gas will be looking to find buyers on the short-term market. However, major markets notably in Europe, are moving into stronger structural decline, and emerging markets may lack the infrastructure to absorb much larger volume if gas demand in China slows. The glut of LNG means there are very limited opportunities for Russia to secure additional markets. Russia's share of internationally traded gas, which stood at 30% in 2021, is halved by 2030 in the steps. Affordability and resilience are watchword for the future. A tense situation in the Middle East is a reminder of a hazard in oil market a year after Russia cut gas supplies to Europe. Vigilance on oil and gas security remains essential throughout the green energy transition, and our projections highlight how the balance of trade and potential vulnerabilities shift over time. In the steps, the share of seaborne crude oil trade from the Middle East to Asia rises from some 40% of the total today to 50% by 2050. Asia is also the final destination for almost all of additional Middle East LNG supply. The global energy crisis was not a clean energy crisis, but it has focused attention on the importance of ensuring rapid, people-centered, and orderly transition. Three interlinked issues stand out: risks to affordability, electricity security, and the resilience of clean energy supply chains sheltering consumers from volatile fuel prices in 2022 cost governments USD 900 billion in emergency support. The way to limit such expenditure in the future is to deploy cost-effective clean technologies at scale, especially in poorer households, communities, and countries that struggle to finance the upfront investment required. As the world moves toward a more electrified, renewable-based system, security of electricity supply is also paramount. Higher investment in robust and digitalized grid needs to be accompanied by a load for batteries and demands response measures for short-term flexibility and low emission technologies for seasonal variation, including hydropower, nuclear, fossil fuel, and carbon capture, utilization, and the storage, bioenergy, hydrogen, and ammonia. And the diversification and innovation are the best strategies to manage supply chain demand dependencies for clean energy technologies and critical minerals. A range of strategies are in place to strengthen the resilience of clean energy supply chain and reduce today's high level of concentration, but this will take time to bear fruit. Exploration and production investment are rising around the world for critical minerals like lithium, cobalt, nickel, and rare earths. But the share of the top three producers in 2022 is either unchanged or has increased from 2019 levels. Our tracking of announced projected suggested concentration levels in 2030 are set to remain high, especially for refining and processing operations. Many midstream projects are being developed in today's major producing regions, with China holding half of planned lithium chemical plants and Indonesia representing early 90% of planned nickel refining facilities. Alongside investments in diversified supply policies, encouraging innovation, mineral substitution, and recycling can moderate trends on the demand side and ease market pressure. They are vital components of critical minerals security. We need to go much further and faster, but the fragmented world will not rise to meet our climate and energy security challenges. Proven policies and technologies are available to align energy security and sustainability goals, speed up the pace of change this decade, and keep the door to 1.5 open. The step sees a peak in energy-related CO2 emissions in the mid-2020s, but emissions remain high enough to push up global average temperature to around 2.4 Celsius in 21. This outcome has improved over successive editions of the Outlook of the outlook, but still points toward very widespread and severe impacts from climate change. The key action required to bend the emission curve downwards to 2030 are widely known and in most cases very cost-effective. Tripling renewable energy capacity, doubling the pace of energy efficiency improvements to 4% per year, ramping up electrification and slashing methane emissions from fossil fuel operations together provide more than 80% of the emissions reductions needed by 2030 to put the energy sector on a pathway to limit warming to 1.5 cc. In addition, innovative large-scale financing mechanisms are required to support clean energy investment in emerging and developing economies. Other measures to ensure an orderly decline in the use of fossil fuels, including an end to new approvals of unbated coal-fired power plants. Every country needs to find its own pathway, and it needs to be inclusive and equitable to secure public acceptance. But this package of global measures provides crucial ingredients for any successful outcome from the COP28 climate change conference in Dubai in December. No country is an energy island, and no country is insulated from the risk of climate change. The necessity of collaboration has never been higher, especially in today's tense times. Governments need to find ways to safeguard cooperation on energy and climate, including by embracing a rule-based system or international trade and spurring innovation and technology transfer. Without this, the chance to limit the rise in global temperature to 1.5 cc will disappear. The outlook for energy security will also look perilous if we lose the benefits of interconnected and well-functioning energy markets to ride out unexpected shocks. 50 years on from the first oil shock, the world has lasting solutions to address energy insecurity that can also help tackle the climate crisis. The first oil shock 50 years ago brought two crucial policy responses firmly into play: energy efficiency and low-emission power, led at the time by hydropower and nuclear. Today's energy decision makers are once again facing geopolitical tensions and the risk of energy shocks, but they have a much broader range of highly competitive clean technologies at their disposal and an accumulated wealth of policy experience on how to accelerate their deployment. The crucial step is to put their readily available solution to work. That's all.